She thought it would be a proud moment, watching her son, a self-made CEO, step into history with a $1 billion deal. But before she even reached the door, the world reminded her she wasn't welcome. In front of polished floors and pearl necklaces, a mother was reduced to nothing more than a stereotype. Humiliation hung heavy in the air, witnessed by the very people her son was about to join. What happened next didn't just shatter a deal, it shattered illusions about respect, power, and belonging. But if he had known the storm waiting behind those marble steps, would he have walked inside at all? Derrick Samuels had spent his life building what no one thought he could. From loading trucks in a dim New Jersey warehouse to running one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the country, he carried every scar of the struggle with quiet pride. To most, he was the picture of success: sharp suits, boardroom deals, headlines that praised his vision. But to him, it was always about one thing: making his mother proud. Gloria Samuels had held him up when the world tried to push him down. She worked long shifts, skipped meals, and carried herself with dignity when others tried to strip it away. Today was supposed to be a celebration. The moment she finally got to see her son, welcomed into the kind of world that once shut its doors on them. But behind the polished smiles and perfectly set tables, old money carried old habits. And for Gloria, stepping into that room meant stepping straight into the line of fire. He thought he was bringing his mother to share in his triumph. Instead, he was leading her toward a humiliation neither of them could forget. Because what happened next wouldn't just test a business deal. It would test everything Derrick thought he'd earned. The black SUV barely stopped rolling before Gloria stepped out, her white hat catching the sunlight like a crown. She moved with quiet grace, the kind that came from years of keeping her chin high when the world tried to bow her head. She wasn't thinking about money or mergers, only about her son. The boy she once walked to school with hand-me-down shoes, now a man negotiating billion-dollar contracts. But pride quickly met the cold edge of prejudice. At the marble steps of the country club, a uniformed staffer stepped into her path. No smile, no warmth, just a firm hand raised. Deliveries and staff used the back entrance. The words weren't meant to question, they were meant to dismiss. Gloria tried to correct her, voice steady, but the woman didn't flinch. She looked at Gloria's purse, her shoes, her skin, and made her decision. You don't belong. Gloria's heart ached with a familiar sting, one she had carried for decades but never quite grew numb to. She wasn't staff. She wasn't here to serve. She was here because her son had invited her, because he had built something worthy of this room. But prejudice didn't care about truth. It only cared about power. Across the patio, Derrick raised a glass, his smile wide until his eyes found his mother. He saw her posture, the staffer's stance, and the slight tremor in her hands clutching her purse. In that moment, his chest tightened with the weight of 1,000 memories. His mother being asked to use the service entrance at church events, neighbors whispering when she walked by, teachers doubting her son's potential before he even had a chance. Then came the voice that cut deeper than any uniform. Victoria Hathaway, pearls on her neck, confidence dripping from her smile. She didn't just stop Gloria. She reduced her to nothing more than a stereotype. Loud enough for others to hear, she sneered about cleaning staff joining the luncheon. The air shifted. Laughter flickered at the edges of the crowd. For Victoria, it was casual cruelty, the kind she would forget before dessert. For Gloria, it was a knife she would never unfeel. Derrick's jaw locked. He set his glass down slowly, every muscle in his body screaming to move, to shield the woman who had shielded him his entire life. He walked straight to her, not with rage, but with something sharper: resolve. He placed a hand on her shoulder, whispered words only she could hear, then looked around at the room that had just humiliated the most important person in his world. Gloria wanted to stay calm, to avoid spoiling his big day, but Derrick saw through her smile. He knew what this moment cost her, even if she wouldn't admit it. And he also knew something else. Respect wasn't optional. Not for him, not for her. He walked her back to the car himself, opening the door like a son raised to honor his mother, not abandon her. She told him not to ruin the moment over her, but to Derrick, she was the moment. Without her, nothing else mattered. Back inside, the champagne tower glistened, the signing table gleamed, and everyone waited for the inevitable, the deal of the year. But Derrick didn't sit in the signing chair. He stood before a room full of power and privilege, staring at the woman who had mocked his mother and made a decision that would send shockwaves far beyond those walls. Because for Derrick Samuels, this was no longer just about money, it was about legacy. And in a matter of minutes, his silence, or his voice, would define everything that came next. He thought the humiliation ended on those marble steps, but what he was about to do would ignite a fire neither side could put out. The deal was minutes away from being signed, pen poised, contracts stacked, the cameras ready to capture the moment when Derrick Samuels would become the face of a historic partnership. But he didn't sit down. He didn't smile. He didn't reach for the pen. Instead, he pushed the chair back, his footsteps echoing across the polished floor like a warning. Conversations stilled, glasses froze mid-air, and every eye in the room followed him. Derrick wasn't thinking about billions or headlines or the investors who had waited months for this signature. He was thinking about his mother, how she had been humiliated just feet from this room. The weight of her silence, the way her hands trembled even as she told him not to fight, the way this club, these people had made her feel invisible. He lifted the contract, held it high, and let the pages fall from his hand like ash. The sound of paper scattering across the marble was deafening. Gasps rippled. Phones lit up. Cameras meant for celebration were now capturing Defiance. Then, in a voice that carried the pain of generations, he told them exactly why. He named the insult. He named the woman who spoke it. He named the centuries of dismissal that this single moment represented. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He spoke with the clarity of someone who knew there was more at stake than money. And when he was done, he looked directly at the people who thought power protected them from consequence, and he walked away. The room erupted. Some applauded in shock. Others muttered about arrogance. A few scrambled to salvage the deal. But nothing could erase what had just happened. A billion-dollar contract lay unsigned on the table, shredded in spirit before ink ever touched it. Derrick left with his mother, her hand in his, heads held high. The cameras followed, the whispers spread, and the headlines began writing themselves. This wasn't just the collapse of a deal. It was the collision of two Americas, the one that promised equality and the one that still denied it at the door. He thought walking away meant losing everything. But what he didn't know yet was that this moment would give him something far greater than money. Because sometimes the cost of silence is far higher than the price of speaking truth. The headlines exploded the next morning. Some called Derrick reckless, a man who threw away fortune for pride. Others hailed him as fearless, finally saying what so many had swallowed in silence. But for Derrick, it was never about perception. It was about his mother, about refusing to let her dignity be the price of his success. The deal collapsed. Investors pulled out. Opportunities vanished almost overnight. But as the dust settled, something else rose in its place: respect. From young entrepreneurs who saw their own mothers in Gloria. From communities tired of biting their tongues. From those who had been told, again and again, that power came only if you learned to endure humiliation quietly. Derrick showed that silence was not the only option. Gloria, who had once feared that her presence might ruin her son's moment, watched as her story became the moment. She saw people speak her name with reverence, not pity. She saw her son walk away from wealth but toward something far greater, legacy. And the country club? It carried on, draped in pearls and champagne, pretending nothing had happened. But the cameras had been there. The world had seen. The illusion of equality behind polished doors had cracked wide open, revealing the rot that so many already knew was there. This story wasn't just about a deal gone wrong. It was about the daily negotiation of dignity that Black Americans are forced into, about the cost of respect in a world that still measures worth through the lens of race. Derrick and Gloria's moment was unique, but it wasn't rare. Humiliations like theirs happen in boardrooms, classrooms, stores, and sidewalks every single day. The only difference is that most don't make headlines. So the question lingers. How many more mothers will be told they don't belong? How many more sons will have to choose between success and their family's dignity? How many more stories will it take before respect is no longer conditional? Because this isn't just Derrick's fight, it's ours. And silence now more than ever is not an option.